Billionaire sees a single mom of two begging. What happened next shocked him. James Crane doesn't believe in coincidences. But when his Range Rover stops at a red light on Michigan Avenue and he sees a woman begging on the corner with two shivering children, holding a sign that reads, "Single mom, no family, babies need medicine," his entire world fractures. Because that single mom huddled against the freezing stone with those two small bodies pressed desperately against her sides isn't a stranger. She's Vanessa Hartwell, the half-sister he destroyed in court, the bastard daughter he erased from their billionaire father's will, the woman he swore would never touch a penny of the Crane fortune. 2 years ago, James stood in a mahogany-paneled courtroom and convinced a judge that Vanessa was a manipulative gold digger who seduced their dying father for his money. He had investigators photograph her at welfare offices. He had lawyers bury her in depositions until she couldn't afford to fight back. He took everything their father wanted her to have and told himself he was protecting the family legacy. But now, staring at her through rain-streaked glass, watching her wrap those children tighter against the winter storm, James sees exactly what protecting his inheritance cost. The billionaire in the luxury SUV and the single mom begging in the cold, separated by 15 feet of frozen sidewalk and 2 years of bitter legal warfare. Vanessa's face is gaunt. Aged by hardship, James can only imagine. Her clothes, clean but worn to threads, hang on a frame that used to be fuller. But it's her eyes that stop his breath. They're not defeated. They're not pleading. They're watching him with an expression he can't read, something that looks almost like anticipation. The smaller child coughs, a wet rattle that cuts through the luxury car's insulation. The older one, a little girl with a face James suddenly realizes looks hauntingly familiar, stares directly at his tinted window as if she can see through the glass, through the wealth, straight into his guilty conscience. His driver glances in the rearview mirror. "Sir, the light's green." But James can't move, can't breathe, can't look away from the wreckage of the woman he spent 2 years systematically destroying. His father's daughter, his sister. The family he decided wasn't family enough. The air inside the Range Rover suddenly feels too warm, too thick, suffocating him with leather and luxury while his half-sister freezes 15 feet away. James pops the door open before his brain catches up to his body. December wind slams into him like a fist, cutting through his Armani suit like it's tissue paper. His $1,000 shoes hit the salted pavement and he's moving toward her, not thinking, just reacting to the sight of those children shivering in clothes that aren't warm enough for this weather. Vanessa. She doesn't flinch when he says her name. Doesn't show surprise. She just looks up at him with those hollow eyes, and James realizes with sick certainty that she knew he'd be here. Knew he took this route every Tuesday. Knew exactly when his car would stop at this light. This isn't an accident. This is a plan. "Hello, James." Her voice is steady despite the cold, despite everything. "Fancy seeing you here?" The sarcasm lands like a knife between his ribs. James looks at the children, really looks at them now, and his stomach drops through the pavement. The little boy has his father's nose, the exact shape, the exact angle. Unmistakable if you've spent your whole life looking at Douglas Crane's face in photographs and mirrors. And the girl has that widow's peak, that distinctive Crane family hairline that James inherited, that his father had, that shows up in every family portrait going back 4 generations. Who are they? James's voice comes out strangled. Harper and Mason. Vanessa adjusts the blanket around them with movements that speak of practice, of nights doing this alone, of a mother who's had to choose between warmth and food. "Your niece and nephew." Well, technically you're half-siblings. But I know how you feel about family that doesn't fit your definition. The words hit like physical blows. Half-siblings, more of his father's children. Secret children James never knew existed. Which means everything he fought for in probate court. Every argument he made about protecting his father's legacy. Every claim that Vanessa was the only mistake Douglas made. All of it was built on incomplete information. All of it was a lie. That's not possible. But even as James says it, he knows it is. His father kept Vanessa secret for 23 years before acknowledging her. Why not more children? Why not an entire second family James was too arrogant to imagine? DNA doesn't care what you think is possible. Vanessa stands slowly, lifting both children with a strength James didn't know poverty could build. Harper, the little girl, buries her face against Vanessa's shoulder. Mason, the boy, stares at James with his father's eyes, and James feels like he's staring at a ghost. How long? James can barely form words. How long has Dad been gone and you've been out here like this? 2 years since he died. 3 weeks out here on this corner. Vanessa shifts Mason higher on her hip. But you'd know that if you'd ever bothered to check what happened to me after your lawyers finished destroying my life. After I lost the court case, after I lost my apartment because I couldn't afford rent and legal fees, after I lost my job because your investigators made sure every employer in Chicago knew I was the gold digger daughter who tried to steal from Douglas Crane. Each word is a hammer blow. James remembers signing off on those strategies, remembers his lawyer suggesting they make her unhireable to pressure her into accepting a smaller settlement. At the time, it was just tactics, just business. Just protecting what was his. Now it's 2 children shivering in weather that could kill them. Let me help. James reaches for his wallet, hands shaking. Please, a hotel, food, medicine for the kids. Whatever you need. I don't want your money, James. Vanessa, be reasonable. Reasonable. Her laugh is sharp enough to cut. You want to talk about reasonable? You stood in court and told a judge our father was senile when he put me in his will. You presented evidence that I manipulated a dying man. You made sure every newspaper in Chicago questioned whether I was even really his daughter. You took everything Dad wanted me to have and convinced yourself you were protecting his legacy. Her voice never rises, but the fury underneath could melt the snow. Now you want to throw cash at me and feel better about yourself? That's not, I'm trying to help your children. Now you care about children? Vanessa's eyes flash. Where was this concern 2 years ago when your lawyers argued I was an unfit mother? When your investigator photographed me at the welfare office and leaked it to the Tribune? When you told the judge that Douglas Crane's bastard daughter didn't deserve to raise children in the Crane tradition? James has no answer because she's right. Every word is true. He remembers that argument. Remembers his lawyer coaching him on how to phrase it to sound protective rather than cruel. Remembers the judge's face when James suggested Vanessa's poverty made her unfit. Mason coughs again, worse this time. His little body shakes with the effort, and James watches Vanessa rub his back with practiced gentleness, murmuring something James can't hear. The tenderness of it, this woman who has nothing giving everything to children who are freezing, breaks something inside James's chest. How much do you need? James's voice cracks. For medicine, for rent, for... I told you, I don't want anything from you. Vanessa starts walking away. Vanessa, wait. Those are Dad's children. They're Cranes! They deserve, she whirls back. They deserve? They deserve? Now her voice does rise. They deserve not to sleep in shelters. They deserved not to go hungry while their billionaire brother lived in a penthouse. They deserved family. She's shaking now, rage and cold and something else James can't name. But you decided they weren't family. You decided Dad's will didn't matter. You decided only your version of the Crane legacy counted. I didn't know they existed, James shouts back. Would it have mattered if you did? Vanessa's question stops him cold. Would you have fought any less hard? Or would you have just worked harder to erase them too? James opens his mouth to deny it. But the honest answer, the one that makes him want to vomit right here on this frozen sidewalk, is that he doesn't know. 2 years ago, consumed by grief and greed and the conviction that he was the rightful heir, would he have fought just as hard to exclude children he'd never met? Children who had as much right to Douglas Crane's love and legacy as James did. Probably. The realization tastes like ash. This isn't over, James says desperately. I can fix this. Let me fix this. Vanessa studies him for a long moment. Then she smiles. It's not a warm smile. It's not forgiving. It's the smile of someone who knows something you don't. You're right, she says quietly. This isn't over. But James? You can't fix what's already been decided. What does that mean? Check your phone. Vanessa starts walking again, heading toward the corner where a black sedan waits. Expensive, warm, completely at odds with the homeless mother performance. Your lawyer's been trying to reach you. Something about an emergency. Something about the probate case being reopened. Something about new evidence the judge couldn't ignore. Ice that has nothing to do with the weather floods James's veins. He fumbles his phone from his pocket with numb fingers. 17 missed calls, 23 texts. The most recent from his attorney, sent 14 minutes ago. Judge ruled, "You need to call now. It's bad." When James looks up, Vanessa is at the sedan. A man in a suit, clearly not homeless, clearly professional, opens the door for her. She settles the children into car seats that were waiting for them. Then she removes the tattered coat she was wearing, revealing professional clothing underneath. Designer labels, expensive fabric, the costume of a woman who has money, not a woman begging for it. She catches James staring and waves. Actually waves, like this is a friendly goodbye. Then the sedan pulls away, leaving James standing alone on a frozen corner, his inheritance suddenly feeling like quicksand beneath his feet. The emergency shareholders meeting starts at 9 a.m., but James hasn't slept. He spent the entire night on the phone with lawyers who kept using words like irreversible and DNA evidence and judicial misconduct investigation. His attorney, Marcus Webb, the man who promised the probate case was sealed forever, sounds like he's aged 10 years since yesterday. The judge reopened the case 6 months ago, Marcus says for the third time. Like repetition will make it make sense. Vanessa presented new DNA evidence, not just for herself, for 2 additional heirs. Your half-siblings, James, Harper and Mason Hartwell, ages 4 and 5. Both confirmed biological children of Douglas Crane through paternity testing that's legally unimpeachable. James sits in his home office overlooking Lake Michigan, watching dawn break over water that looks cold and gray and unforgiving. 6 months ago? Why am I only hearing about this now? Because the proceedings were sealed at Vanessa's request. She argued that media attention would harm the children. The judge agreed. Marcus's voice carries an edge of something that might be respect. She played this perfectly, James. Built her case in complete silence while you thought you'd won. The revised will is legal. That's what the judge ruled yesterday afternoon while James was watching his half-sister perform homelessness on a street corner. The will Douglas Crane signed 8 months before he died, the one that split his estate 3 ways between all 3 of his children, was legitimate. The will James's lawyers claimed was forged, signed under duress, the product of a dying man's diminished capacity, was actually the truest expression of Douglas Crane's final wishes. A father trying to provide for all of his children, not just the one born inside a marriage. Which means everything James has spent 2 years protecting isn't actually his. Crane Properties, the commercial real estate empire Douglas built over 40 years, now belongs equally to 3 people, James, Vanessa, and a trust controlled by Vanessa, on behalf of Harper and Mason until they reach 18. 2/3 of the voting shares are now in Vanessa's hands. James walks into the Crane Properties boardroom at 8:55 a.m. and knows immediately that he's lost. The energy in the room is wrong. His board members, men and women he's worked with for years, people he thought were loyal, won't meet his eyes. His CFO is studying documents with an expression that suggests she's reading James's obituary. His general counsel looks like he wants to be anywhere else. At the head of the table in Douglas Crane's chair, James's chair for the past 2 years, sits Vanessa. She's not wearing the threadbare clothes from last night. She's in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than the monthly rent on whatever apartment she actually lives in. Her hair is styled professionally. She looks rested, prepared, like a woman who's been planning this moment for months. Next to her, in chairs that have been brought in specially because this room was never designed for children, sit Harper and Mason. They're cleaned up, wearing nice clothes, hair combed neatly. They look like Crane children. They look like they belong here in a way that makes James's stomach turn. Good morning, James. Vanessa's voice is professional, cool. Nothing like the desperate single mom from last night. Thank you for joining us. Please sit. James doesn't sit. What is this? This is an emergency shareholders meeting, called in accordance with our corporate bylaws when there's been a significant change in ownership structure. Vanessa gestures to the documents in front of each board member. As you know, or perhaps you don't, since you didn't return your lawyer's calls until 3 a.m., The probate court ruled yesterday that our father's final will was legitimate. Crane Properties now has 3 equal owners. Me, you, and a trust for Harper and Mason that I control as guardian. This is insane. James's voice comes out too loud. You can't just walk in here and... I'm not walking in, James. I'm taking my seat. There's a difference. Vanessa's smile doesn't reach her eyes. My seat and the children's seats, which our father wanted us to have 2 years ago before you decided we weren't family enough to matter. James looks at the board members. You're going to allow this? She has no experience running a company. She's a... He stops himself before he says something he can't take back. A what? Vanessa asks quietly. A bastard? A gold digger? An unfit mother living in poverty? Those were your words in court, James. I remember every single one. She stands, and there's steel underneath the professional polish. What I actually am is a woman with a degree in business administration from Northwestern. A woman who spent 2 years studying every aspect of this company while you thought I was too broken to matter. A woman who knows exactly how many questionable deals you've made, how many corners you've cut, how many times you've prioritized profit over the principles our father built this company on. The room goes silent. Even the children seem to sense the tension, sitting perfectly still. I've reviewed the financials, Vanessa continues, walking around the table like she owns it, which legally she now partially does. The Wellington Tower deal. The South Side development that displaced 200 families. The tax structure that's legal but barely ethical. The pension fund you raided to finance your acquisition strategy. She stops directly across from James. Dad would be ashamed of what you've done with his legacy. Don't you dare. James starts. Our father built this company on integrity. Vanessa's voice cuts through his. He came from nothing. He knew what it meant to struggle. Every property he developed, he thought about the people who'd live and work there. He paid fair wages. He invested in communities. He believed business could be profitable and principled. She glances at the documents. You've spent 2 years turning Crane Properties into exactly what he fought against. A machine that extracts maximum profit with minimum conscience. James wants to argue, but the board members are nodding. He can see it. They agree with her. So here's what's going to happen, Vanessa says, returning to her seat. The board is going to vote on new leadership. I'm proposing that James step down as CEO and I take his place, with him transitioning to Chief Operating Officer if he chooses to stay with the company. You can't force me out. James slams his hand on the table. I'm not forcing you. I'm giving you a choice. Vanessa's voice is maddeningly calm. Stay and help rebuild what you've damaged, or leave and take a generous severance package. But either way, the board is voting on leadership today because 2/3 of this company's shareholders, me and the children, want new direction. James looks at Harper and Mason. They're so small in those big chairs. Mason is swinging his legs, not quite reaching the floor. Harper is drawing on a notepad someone gave her. They have no idea what's happening. No idea they're participating in their half-brother's destruction. They're children, James says desperately. They can't vote? No, but their guardian can vote on their behalf. That's how trusts work, James. You'd know that if you'd ever bothered to understand the will you were fighting so hard to overturn. Vanessa softens slightly, just for a moment. They're not weapons. They're family, our family. Harper and Mason didn't ask to be born into this war. But they exist. They're Dad's children. They deserve what he wanted them to have. The truth of it sits heavy in the room. James looks at his half-siblings, really looks at them for the first time, and sees his father's face reflected in theirs. Douglas Crane loved these children enough to provide for them. Loved them enough to split his empire 3 ways. Loved them enough to risk the conflict he knew would come after he died. And James loved his inheritance more than he loved his father's wishes. All in favor of new leadership, Vanessa says quietly. Please raise your hand. Every hand goes up except James's. Even the board members he thought were loyal. Even the executives he promoted. They all vote to remove him from the position he thought was his birthright. James Crane, master of his universe, sits down heavily in a chair that used to feel like a throne and now feels like an ejection seat. The motion passes, Vanessa says. James, you have 24 hours to decide if you want to stay on as COO or accept severance. We'll need your answer in writing. She gathers her papers like this is just another business meeting. Like she hasn't just dismantled her half-brother's entire world. Harper, Mason, let's go. We have school to get to. The children hop down from their chairs. Mason runs to Vanessa, wrapping his arms around her legs. Harper grabs her hand. They leave the boardroom together, a family that James tried to erase and instead made stronger. James sits alone in the empty room, surrounded by the silence of his defeat, and understands that last night's street corner performance wasn't desperation. It was Vanessa giving him one last chance to see what he'd destroyed before she destroyed him. A final opportunity to offer help, to show humanity, to prove he'd changed. He failed the test, and now he's paying for it. His phone buzzes. Text from an unknown number. The children ask if Uncle James will come to dinner sometime. I told them maybe, if he learns what family actually means. B. James looks at the message for a long time. Uncle James, they want to know their uncle. These children he tried to deny exist want a relationship with him despite everything. The question is whether he's capable of being the man they deserve. 6 months later, James stands outside a modest house in Lincoln Park, holding birthday presents for children he's just learning to know. His Range Rover is gone, sold to pay legal fees. The penthouse is gone too. What remains is enough to live on and a COO position he's learning to deserve. Inside, through the window, he sees Vanessa helping Harper blow out candles. Mason jumps excitedly beside his sister. They're laughing. They're safe. They're loved in ways money never guaranteed. James knocks. Vanessa opens the door. There's still distance between them. Wounds don't heal in months, but her expression isn't cold anymore. You came, she says. I'm trying, James replies. To be better. To be family. Harper runs to the door. Uncle James! She hugs his legs without hesitation, without knowing he once tried to erase her existence. Children forgive easier than adults. James is learning that. Vanessa steps aside, letting him enter the home his father's other children built. It's smaller than what James lost, but watching Mason show him drawings, hearing Harper's laugh, seeing Vanessa smile without bitterness, this feels like something his father would recognize. Not an empire. Just family, finally enough.